Let us start this meeting tonight by recognizing Veterans Day and honoring all the men and women that have made the ultimate sacrifice for our freedom. And let us also honor all the men and women that have previously served or currently serving in all branches of the military to continue to protect our freedom. Well, as we all know, November is a special time of the year as we contemplate how to creatively, and of course safely, celebrate Thanksgiving with friends and family. May we all have gratitude in our hearts as we reflect on our countless blessings and rely on our inner strength that all of us have to stay present in the moment and to forge ahead in the coming days. Each of us being here tonight is just another reminder of how well we are able to pivot and our collective ability as members of AAUW to overcome adversity. Once again, we have a very exciting program lineup tonight. But first, I would like to take a few minutes to make some announcements. Number one, we have some very exciting news about our fundraising task force. As you may recall, the task force objective was to raise monies to replace the lost revenue from canceled fundraising events such as the Style Show. I am extremely happy that Linda Pellew will be leading this effort. Stay tuned, there will be more exciting news forthcoming. Number two, we are planning an annual, I'm sure an annual, Jingle and Mingle Zoom event December 16th at 6:30. We are going to have a festive sing-along, festive demonstrations, festive apparel, and just getting into the festive spirit for the holidays. You're not going to want to miss this event. You'll be seeing some invitations in the next week. And lastly, in the season of giving, we'd like to give thanks to a couple of our members. Kathy Bruning, the Sunshine Coordinator, offering always encouragement and support to our members. Becca Sturgis, for keeping us current on our Facebook. And of course, the always remarkable Carol Sturgis, our mastered wizard of technology. So moving us forward, a couple of Zoom reminders. First of all, as everyone knows, you'll be muted during the meeting. Second, you may ask a question of the speaker or make comments anytime during the presentation. You can use the chat feature located at the bottom of your screen. And many of us enjoy the chat feature during the presentation, but we would ask if you have a specific question or comment for the speaker, if you would please preface speaker, question, comment. Misty Dearborn has done an outstanding job monitoring incoming questions and comments to the speaker. After the conclusion of tonight's presentation, Misty will address some of the comments and the questions for our speaker tonight. The last item is that we had very positive feedback last month about our drawing. We will again be having a drawing at the end of the program. And just as an FYI, no AAUW funds were used for prizes. Prizes will be awarded as when you logged on this evening. So now let me pass the baton to Marge Williams and Jill Meyer, who are teaming up tonight to celebrate the life of Ruth Bader Ginsburg and to discuss a scholarship in Justice Ginsburg's name. Marge and Jill.
I gotta unmute. All right. So we are going to talk a little bit about Ruth Bader Ginsburg tonight. And really we titled the piece of this part of the meeting, The Legacy of RGB and the Courts. And we're also going to be connecting our shares donation process to a Ruth Bader Ginsburg Scholarship Fund. So I wanted to just start by sharing some public policy pieces that are connected to basically what National has stated about the passing of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. You can read. I'm going to read the highlighted parts. You can read the others, silently to yourself. But we totally know that she was an amazing, beloved role model and a very pioneering woman in the field of justice. So the statement that was made by AAUW National, and I think this is so important, is on behalf of AAUW and its members and supporters who recognized her with a 1999 AAUW Achievement Award. And of course, the organization is extending their condolences to her family, her colleagues, and every American whose lives and hearts she touched. And we know that she's touched so many lives. I mean, just since her passing, everything from all of the statements that have been throughout the internet, on Instagram and on Twitter and Facebook, and even in kids' Halloween costumes, we know that she is a wonderful role model whose legacy will live on forever. So in her, as far as her replacement goes, we now have Justice Amy Coney Barrett on board. She was appointed by the Supreme Court. And this was the week of October 26th when this happened. And basically what AAUW is really hoping is that in her tenure on the highest court in the land, Justice Barrett will be inspired by the legacy of Justice Ginsburg to uphold the hard-earned rights of women and girls. AAUW has fought for gender equity, and we're committed to working with all branches of government to ensure the expansion of those rights in years ahead. So we are hoping that as another woman on the courts, that and being a mom and a family member of many kids, and diversity within her family, that she too will be able to follow in many of the steps of Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Jill Meyer, and she'll talk to us a little bit about the scholarship fund.
Great. So for the month of November, all of our shares donations, we're asking for a special honor for Ruth Bader Ginsburg. So you saw in our postgraduate what you see here on the screen, or if you missed it, go check out the postgraduate. This is the form that you'll want to submit, or you can just put RBG in your memo on your check. In addition, we do now have a donate button on our website. I just asked if you specifically would like to donate to the Ruth Bader Ginsburg or in honor of her life and legacy, to just drop me an email to indicate that, so we make sure, of course, all donations going through that donate button on our website are going to shares, but we do want to call out those that are specific for RBG here. So excited for this opportunity, and we do this often for some of the passing of some of our members, and that's really where this idea was rooted for. So we encourage these special donations and these special times to really honor her and her legacy. So we appreciate in advance of the donations you have coming forward and that have already come forward. So thank you. Back to you, Anne.
Okay, so that's okay. So we
Yep.
have a poll this evening, and take a look at the questions in the poll, and it's a Ruth Bader Ginsburg poll. Check it out and give your response.
Could you read those out loud, Mark?
Oh, sure, I will. Okay,
reading.
RGB wore many different collars to show her response in the court. Which collar did she consider her favorite? A spiky, bejeweled necklace on a black band, a simple white crochet jabot from South Africa, a gold bib necklace with a feathered wing and spiky armor, or a beige and egg yolk yellow crochet with gold chain and beaded drops.
We have about half of our members at this point, so we'll give them a little more time.
All right, they're reading carefully and thinking.
There are no prizes, but there's tremendous bragging rights.
Absolutely.
All right, it looks like we've stopped. So I'm going to end the polling.
All right. So 75% of people chose the simple white crocheted jabot or jabot. I don't know how to pronounce that, if anybody else does, from South Africa. Something that was special to her from Cape Town. I'm going to tell you a little bit about those other necklaces very quickly. So if we can close that screen, and I will go to my next PowerPoint and we'll jump in with what all those collars mean very quickly. Can I just close it, Carol? Yes? Okay, I did. Okay, so this particular collar here was her favorite. And this, of course, is the white collar, and a lot of us are wearing white pearls in representation of this. This was a collar that she wore basically it was kind of her favorite, and she wore that even when she was at Obama's State of the Union in 2012. She also wore it on her 20th anniversary on the bench in 2013, and a lot of photo sessions with her colleagues. So that was her favorite collar, just the simple white collar. Her back in business collar, that was after she had been ill. She had you know, a lot of health issues and things, but when she came back, she wore this stunning necklace that represented wings by Stella and Dot. And this was such an eye-catching piece. And what that showed is that no injury or illness would stop her from rising to the occasion of performing her duty. The next collar is the dissent collar. And this collar has such important significance. Whenever she was expressing disapproval over a court ruling, she wore this black bib necklace with rhinestones. It's by Banana Republic. The dark colors and punk-inspired design certainly stood out from her collection of predominantly white collars. It looks fitting for a dissent, she told Couric. Katie Couric, actually. And then the fourth collar, another one of her most popular, was her majority opinion collar. She says, when I'm announcing an opinion for the court, this is a collar I wear. Ginsburg told Katie Couric about a yellow crochet jabot with pink edges that features a chain and gold appliques. She also expressed that it was a gift from her law clerks. Indeed, not only is the design fun and colorful, it holds deep sentimental value, making it perfect for court rulings that she agrees with. So I don't know about you guys, but I learned a lot about Ruth Bader Ginsburg collars over the last few weeks, and pretty exciting that she was such a powerful woman who expressed her decisions in such a variety of interesting ways. So I'd like to just close with that same quote again: fight for the things that you care about, but do it in a way that will lead others to join you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jill, and thank you, Marge. That was very, very informative. And once again, I think Justice Ginsburg would be very humbled. So, and getting back to that super donation button, I had the opportunity to use that the other day. It works remarkably well. You just click it, and then it will ask for your PayPal, or you may pay with your credit card, whichever one is comfortable. And I'd like to give a special shout out to Vicki Felandrinos and Felicia Velcello. I'm sure I totally overstepped your name, so I do apologize for that. But they worked very hard to make sure that this button was operational. So I encourage everyone to use the donate button, use it once, use it often. So it'll be very, very easy. So next up, we have two very special guests tonight. They are scholarship recipients, and I'd like to ask Dawn Marshus, our college relations liaison, to introduce these special young women. Dawn, it's all yours.
Hi, thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'm really happy to introduce two of our scholarship winners this year. We once again were able to give out 5 scholarships of $1,500 apiece. And so we have Whitney Johnson, who is studying epidemiology from Carroll University, and Sydney Welsh from WCTC, who is studying nursing. And each of them will just take a few minutes to tell us a little bit about themselves and what that scholarship means to them. So maybe we could begin, Sydney, if you would like to start, and then Whitney, you can follow.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sydney, as was just previously said, and I'm a nursing student at WCTC. I just wanted to say thank you so much for your generous donation for my future. I really wanted to just start off by saying thank you to the AAUW West Suburban Milwaukee branch. Paying for college has not always been easy. I haven't had a lot of, growing up in a single parent household, I haven't had a lot of support, financial support from my family. But so I've had to kind of take on the brunt of a lot of the costs of college, but I am where I am because of them. But to continue forward, I have to take on these responsibilities. And I just wanted to reiterate that your support has really decreased my financial burdens and has allowed me to study more and focus less on work and more on my future. For the rest of the time, I just kind of wanted to talk about my journey to nursing school and a major reason for becoming a nurse. So the plan was after graduating high school, I wanted to attend Carroll University for the nursing program. But at the time, I just wasn't sure if that was my calling. So I decided to take some time off and really figure out what it was that I wanted to do. During that 2-year break, my grandparents became very sick. My grandma was diagnosed with dementia and my grandpa had some physical ailments. And my mom and I decided that we didn't want them to go to a nursing home and that we really wanted to do our best to take care of them and provide for them. And so I spent most of my time during those 2 years taking care of them. And it was a very difficult time, but I learned the importance of caregiving and how just supporting a person and being there for them can really improve a person's quality of life. And I hope to continue that in the future. And as soon as I could, I applied for nursing school, and it's been one of the best decisions that I've made. So in conclusion, I'm grateful that you have decided to support this journey that I'm on, and I hope to share the kindness you've shown me to others in the future. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sydney. We appreciate you taking the time to join us tonight. All the best to you. And
Thank
now,
you very much.
yes. And now, Whitney, if you'd like to say a few words.
Hello, everyone. It's really nice to be here with you ladies tonight. I just want to thank you so much. This organization is just amazing what you ladies do to stand up for women's voice and help, to create change. I'm currently a student at Carroll University for Public Health. I want to specialize in epidemiology, which was before the pandemic, so it's not because of the pandemic. So it's kind of, so I'm looking to get in and prevent pandemics, learn out everything I can so we can prevent the next pandemic and save lives and just keep me moving forward in the healthcare field. This scholarship has been wonderful. As Sydney said, I mean, it's really hard to pay for school, and also like her, I don't have family that supports me with that financially. So this has helped me really focus and buckle down on my studies and help afford paying for the tuition, because that's not always cheap. So I greatly appreciate it. And it's hard. I'm a non-traditional student. I went back in my 30s. So that's always, that's a change, but I never knew really what I wanted to do in life. And with my husband's career, we moved a lot. I've lived in California, North Dakota, South Dakota. Now we're back in Wisconsin. Thank God. I just love the Midwest. So I never really got to figure out what my true calling was in life. And when we moved back, everything just lined up. It was just like a sign that this is what you're supposed to do. And I realized, you know, I need to do something for me. I need to go back to school, not worry about what people say about age. You know, I think education is valid, especially for women, to better yourself. So I've just been really grateful for the scholarship so I can really move forward in my life. I mean, you ladies are wonderful. So I want to thank you so much. It's been amazing.
Well, thank you, Whitney. And I think you're absolutely right. The age doesn't matter. So good for you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Dawn, and a special thanks to Whitney and for Sydney to join us tonight. One of the things that Sydney said was about kindness, and isn't that so poignant? And so I just have such a high regard for that, and also for Whitney leaning into the pandemic in these very, very troubling and difficult times. So we have such great admiration. So thank you very much for taking time out of your schedule. So as we move forward, AAUW's public policy that aligns with tonight's topic is to support the civil and human rights of all immigrants, including a fair and just path to legal status. So at this point, I would like to ask Ann Krull to introduce our featured speaker tonight. So Ann, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mary. It's my pleasure to introduce Erin Barbato. Erin's the director of the Immigrant Justice Clinic at the University of Wisconsin Law School. She teaches second and third year law students to represent individuals in removal proceedings and with humanitarian-based immigration relief. Previously, Erin was founding member of the Barbato Immigration Law and the executive director of and staff attorney at the Community Immigration Law Center. Prior to this position, Erin managed a boutique immigration law firm's Madison office and was a staff attorney with Catholic Charities Legal Services for Immigrants. Prior to attending law school, Erin volunteered as a teacher of a nonprofit organization in Ecuador. While in Ecuador, she worked with families and recently resettled refugee families living at or below the poverty line. The Wisconsin Law Journal recognized Erin in 2010 as an up-and-coming lawyer for her dedication to representing immigrants and pro bono service. In 2013, she received the Lee and Lynn Copen Family Justice Award from Women and Children's Horizons for her work with immigrant victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. The Wisconsin Law Journal again recognized Erin's work with immigrants by awarding her as a woman in law in 2014. She has been a member of Wisconsin Pro Bono Honor Society since 2013. Currently, Erin is a member of the American Immigration Lawyers Association, the Wisconsin Bar Association, and on the board of Community Immigration Law Center. Erin, do you sleep? Erin's also a daughter of Mary Murphy, one of our members, a wife, and a great mom. Tonight's presentation title is Current Immigration Policies in the U.S. and Wisconsin. Let's offer Erin our best virtual welcome. Virtual welcome.
That works.
Erin?
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for that introduction. As you can see right here, when you were quoting RBG, I pulled out a picture that one of my former students gave to me a few years ago with one of my favorite quotes, and I try to live by that every day. thank you so much for the invitation and for inviting me to be in this space right now. I find it actually very welcoming and calming to be among so many women who I admire, and I feel the spirit. And congratulations to Sydney and Whitney on the congratulations on what the scholarship and of all the work that you're doing. So I'm hoping, hi mom, just say hi to my mom real quick. And then one of my second moms, Linda Babcock, who is also on here, who was also very important in my growing up and to me today. So I'm going to share a screen with you and go through a PowerPoint. I will try to make all of this information digestible. I do teach law, and sometimes I get into the jargon of too many things. So feel free to stop me and tell me that I'm not making sense. I want you all to feel comfortable and safe, and that this is a conversation where we can all learn and grow, and in order to make this world and our country a better place. So I'm going to try to share my screen right now, but just as a warning, I always have one technical difficulty during every presentation I give. So let's see when that happens. Oh, okay. Well, it just happened right now. So I can't share my screen. Can someone give me permission to share my screen? Who's ever the host?
Carol?
You should be able to share your screen. I think everyone has that capability.
Now I can.
You can't. Oh.
No, I got it now. I got
Okay.
it. So we're good. For like a second, I couldn't. So there was my technical difficulty. I knew it was going to happen. So we'll start here. Okay, everybody can see this, I'm assuming. Thumbs up. Okay, great. So I'm hoping to talk about tonight, and I think I have 40 minutes. So you can always mute me if I go over and you need to move on. So feel free. But I just want to talk a little bit about the current immigration system and policies that are affecting the US and Wisconsin. And this, as you can imagine, has changed quite dramatically over the past 4 years on almost a day-to-day basis, but also over the past few days. So bear with me. I think I can give you guys a roadmap of what's going on and what's going to hopefully go on in the future. So today I hope to talk about immigration laws and the current state of immigration, as well as a look at the future and what it may hold, and then leave a little time for questions. I just wanted to, in honor of who you are honoring tonight, I wanted to include a quote from RBG. So she said, "What is the difference between a bookkeeper in New York City's garment district and a Supreme Court justice?" And she answered, "1 generation. My own life bears witness. The difference between the opportunities available to my mother and those afforded to me." And I wanted to give a little shout out to our Vice President-elect, Kamala Harris, who is a first-generation immigrant from her parents from Jamaica and India. And she was wearing the suffragette white, which I wear tonight as well, in recognition of our 100-year anniversary of the women's right to vote, but also recognizing that it wasn't 100 years for every woman, especially for those in minorities. It took a little bit longer, but we still celebrate the work of our predecessors. I also wanted to just do a quick thank you to veterans on today, November 11th. They are an intricate part of, immigrants are an intricate part of our military. There's an estimated 511,000 foreign-born veterans, many including citizens living in the United States, and approximately 40,000 immigrants actively serving today. I also thought one thing that I learned during the, while preparing this presentation is 22% of congressional medals of honors have gone to immigrants, 759 of 3,500. But one other thing to point out is there's over 250 veterans that have been placed in removal proceedings or deported in the past 7 years, and it continues to happen. So one thing we can pay attention to, and I don't know if any of you have watched Immigration Nation on Netflix, but there's one episode in there that really concentrates on veterans that have been deported. Mostly it's due to drug issues, dealing with PTSD. So something to just be aware of. So I want to tell you a little bit about the work that I do, and it will give you a little bit of information about what's going on in our current immigration system. So I work at the Immigrant Justice Clinic, and I'm a clinical professor, and it's at the University of Wisconsin Law School. So you can see in the background here, Bascom Hill, which some of you may be familiar with. But I teach law students, second and third year law students, to represent people who are facing deportation. Most of the people who are facing deportation are seeking asylum, refuge in the United States, or other forms of humanitarian relief. And over the past 4 years, this type of relief and this work has really been changed quite substantially. And I'll talk about that in a little bit. But we work on the basis of the Wisconsin idea, which some of you may be familiar with, but it's one of the longest and deepest traditions surrounding the University of Wisconsin. The Wisconsin idea signifies a general principle that education should influence people's lives beyond the boundaries of the classroom. Synonymous with Wisconsin for more than a century, the idea has become a guiding philosophy of the university outreach here in Wisconsin and outside of our borders. So the work that we do at the Immigrant Justice Clinic is really based on something. When someone's placed in an immigration proceeding, it's civil proceedings. So in law, we have criminal proceedings and we also have civil proceedings. And in criminal proceedings, as many of you probably know, is you are afforded the right to an attorney, government paid if you cannot otherwise afford it. But in immigration proceedings, even though it may lead to deportation and permanent banishment from our country, you have a right to an attorney, but only if you can afford one or find a pro bono attorney. And here in Wisconsin, we only have about 5 attorneys that do this type of work pro bono. And so most people can't afford to be represented in court. But if you are represented in court, you are 5 times more likely to not be deported. So the work that we do is very important, I think, to our clients and then to my students as well, because we are able to provide access to justice. And what we try to do is provide fair representation. Deportation cases, the cases that we work on, are the only legal proceedings in the United States in which people are routinely detained by federal government and are required to litigate for their liberty against trained government attorneys without the assistance of counsel. So that's where our work comes in. We try to get that finger off of that scale there. My 6-year-old daughter asked me when I was preparing this, what did this mean? I just said, honey, it just means it's a little bit less fair for some people in the system. And so we're really trying to work on making it fair, because when someone's going to be deported and be separated from maybe the only country they know and their family permanently, my goal is to ensure that people have a fair trial, at least. We do work with people in detention, immigrant detention, which is also civil. So people are not in immigrant detention because they're serving a criminal sentence. They're in there because they are facing deportation. Right now in Wisconsin, we have 1 immigrant detention center, and that is in Dodge County. We used to have one in Kenosha as well, but Kenosha shut its doors during the pandemic, and they got in a fight with ICE because they wouldn't take more people in during the pandemic. So we represent people who are detained at Dodge County Detention Facility, and there's about 200 beds for immigrants facing deportation there. We also represent children in Wisconsin who are facing deportation. One of the hardest things to recognize about our immigrant justice system in the United States is that children who are placed in removal proceedings are not afforded right to an attorney unless they can afford it. Same thing. So have you seen in the news, probably some of you, that children will appear in front of a judge by themselves without any representation and asked to articulate why they shouldn't be deported from the United States. And so we represented a lot of children who are seeking asylum, something called special immigrant juvenile status, U non-immigrant status, which is for victims of serious crimes, T non-immigrant status for victims of human trafficking. And we also are representing a number of families and children that have been affected by the family separation policies of this current administration. We also represent people with DACA, Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. You may know this as Dreamers. So they're young people who have been brought to the United States prior to their 16th birthday and otherwise have graduated from high school or currently in high school. They can't have any sort of criminal record and there currently are about 6,600 people with DACA in the United States. And in the future, if in a Biden administration, there will be a lot more people eligible for DACA at that point as well. And then we also do experiential learning trips, where I lead groups of students to these two areas. You can see my beautiful drawings of these arrows, which are supposed to tell you where we go. We go from Wisconsin to this arrow here. There's a family detention center in Dilley, Texas, which is about an hour south of San Antonio, where 2,400 women and children are detained, immigrant women who are seeking asylum in the United States. And then this other spot, this other arrow signifies where we go in Tijuana, where during this administration, asylum seekers have been forced to remain while they seek asylum. And so I take groups of students there to provide additional access to legal representation to people who otherwise would be going through this process on their own. Okay, so now I want to do a brief overview of immigration law. This normally takes me 4 months to teach to law students, so I'm going to do it in about 5 minutes, and I hope that you learned something. But if you don't, I'm always available. You can come back or you can audit my course. Few important terms, and many of you probably know what these are, but I think it's important to just review while we're going through this. So we look at what are some important terms in immigration law. What is a US citizen? You become a US citizen by land, by blood, or by act of law. So if you're born in the United States, regardless of the status of your parents, unless they're diplomats, you are a US citizen. You can also be born abroad to US citizens, or you can naturalize after being a lawful permanent resident for a certain number of years. Lawful permanent residents are people that are allowed to live and work in the United States indefinitely, as long as they don't do something that will make them what's called deportable. Normally that's by being convicted of a crime. And then we also have about 11 to 12 million people in the United States who are undocumented immigrants. These are people that have entered the United States without inspection or remained in the United States after entering the United States with a visa. I just highlight that the term illegal immigrant isn't something that we use anymore. A human being can't be illegal, so we really try to lead with using undocumented or unauthorized immigrant. There's also another group that you've probably heard about in the news where people have a temporary protection from deportation, and that's the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, DACA, and then also temporary protected status. And these are the countries that currently have temporary protected status. It's usually the executive, the president, will signify that certain people from certain countries, if they're in the United States when a war or a natural disaster occurs, they can remain in the United States until it's safe for them to return to their home country. When I look at how people can come to the United States and remain here permanently, sometimes I break it up into these 3 categories: blood, sweat, and tears. So blood being your family. A family member can apply for you to come to the United States. Employment, you may be able to come through an employer and remain here permanently, or humanitarian based. And most of that is going to be refugee or asylee status. We do also have the diversity lottery. So you could apply to become a lawful permanent resident in the United States if you're from an underrepresented country. And there's 50,000 visas available for people a year to come to the United States under this. And it's to help diversify the United States. This has been controversial for a while, and it may not remain forever, but certain countries, people from certain countries can apply to a lottery to see if they can win the ability to come to the United States. So immigrating to the United States, people can come here as immigrants or non-immigrants. So immigrants are people who are coming here permanently to be in the United States. And then non-immigrants are people who are coming here for a specific purpose for a specific amount of time. So I work with a lot of students that are non-immigrants. They're here to get their education. But we also see our tourist industry is vibrant because of foreign visitors. So a lot of times you might get what's called a B2 visa to come to the United States to go to Disneyland or to visit your family. But there's no general visa. You always have to have a reason to come to the United States under the law. Okay. Every year, our laws allow 480,000 people to immigrate permanently to the United States through family. And then through employment, 140,000 every year. And then refugees, this is a number that is controlled by the executive branch. And I'll talk about that in a little bit of how that changes year to year and how it's changed substantially in the past 4 years. But this is a drawing I have, and my people are a little bit discombobulated in this. So they're not supposed to be in Canada, but mostly it's just to illustrate that asylees, if this little guy here was in the US, they can apply for the asylum in the US, but people who are seeking refugee status, they are outside of the United States, and the United Nations determines whether they're a refugee. Asylum laws are international and domestic. This has been, this is where I do most of my work in asylum law. An asylum was created in 1951 in our laws after our country's and the world's failure to react to World War II and to save people who were persecuted by Nazi Germany. The Refugee Act of 1980 created a system for admitting refugees into the country, and it allows people to come to the United States and apply for asylum here. It's open to anyone from any country. Not everyone from every country is going to qualify, but people may enter the United States legally or illegally to apply for asylum. And to qualify for asylum or refugee status, you have to prove that you were persecuted or have a fear of future persecution based on your race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. Okay, so now I want to move on to current immigration policies. And I just need to highlight that there has been a policy wall that has been built under this administration. Over 400 changes to immigration law, mostly through executive orders and proclamations, regulations by this administration have happened in the past 4 years. It's been quite astounding. The Trump administration has taken unilateral action, and nearly none of these policies changes have congressional approval. Basically, this is to say that the executive, no matter who the executive is, our president has a lot of control over our immigration policies. From when we look at when Obama was president, he was named the deporter in chief. He deported more people than any other president in the history of the country. He also created deferred action for childhood arrivals under his executive order. But Trump has come in and done quite a bit to change our asylum system, change our entire immigration system from family-based to employment-based to humanitarian-based without any act of Congress, no change in law. And I will talk about some of the more substantial changes. And I can't cover everything by any means, because my estimate is there's over 900 of them. 400 is kind of a lower guess. But I've outlined a few of them here, and some of these pictures are probably familiar to you. But the executive order, a travel ban, or what's otherwise known as the Muslim ban, that happened about 10 days after Trump took office, separating children from their parents, the zero tolerance policy. There's a new public charge rule that bars anybody from coming to the United States unless they have a lot of financial means. There's been increased ICE enforcement, building a wall on the southern border, a physical wall, migrant protection protocols, a decrease in approval of immigrant visas, the rescission of DACA, and the termination of temporary protective status for many countries. And I'm going to cover a few of them in detail a little bit more. So this is a graph of the number of lawful permanent residents that we have permitted to come to the country starting from before 1830, so long time ago. You can see that there was a large spike in 1990 when we had I think it was under Reagan, had the amnesty. So we offered legalization for many people who have lived and worked in the United States for over 10 years. And then you can see through the, now this goes up into 2018, that it has taken kind of a dive in the past few years. 2017, 2018, and 2019, we had about 1 million people come here as lawful permanent residents. But in 2020, that number was cut in half to about 600,000 people, which is a huge decrease in the number of people and has a great effect on the growth of people in the United States. We may all remember the executive order protecting, what's called the executive order protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States. This barred people from 7 majority Muslim countries from coming to the United States, and it remains in effect to this day. I mentioned before that the executive branch has the control over the number of refugees that can enter the United States. Refugees are people that are deemed by the United Nations to be have been victims of persecution or fear of persecution based on their race, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. And so in 2016, the number was set at 85,000 by Obama. And then you can see over the past few years, 2017, 50,000, 2018, 45,000, 2019, 30,000, and 2020, 80,000, or 18,000, I'm sorry. This is the lowest number in history of the United States since we've had the refugee admission program, while the number of refugees in the world has never been higher since World War II. We will see what happens in the future, but many organizations that serve refugees, almost all of them have closed. Not because there aren't refugees in the world that need their services, but just because we have closed our borders to people who have been deemed refugees by the United Nations, and they have been unable to come to the United States. There are a lot of questions in the chat, and I will hopefully be able to get to them at the end. It's hard for me to monitor them both. Sorry about that. There's been an increase in civil detention in the United States, quite a substantial increase, and more so during the past 4 years. But in 1994, we had 7,000 people that were in immigrant detention. So those were people that were facing deportation and placed in immigrant detention. This past year, we had over 50,000 people in immigrant detention. Again, those are people that are not in there for serving a sentence for any criminal act. They're in there just during the process of their deportation proceedings. Immigrant detention is expensive, and the people that benefit from this the most are private companies. So the current administration is now requesting a $3.1 billion in fiscal year of 2021 to increase the number of beds for immigrants to 60,000 people. Adult immigration detention costs $161 per day, and family detention, that's women and children who are in detention, $266 a day, the tax dollars. This is one of the places that I go with students. We represent women and children who are seeking asylum that are detained here. This detention facility houses 2,400 women and children at a time. The detention facility was built under the Obama administration and continues to be in place today, even during the pandemic, where it detains women and children who are seeking asylum. Okay, the next thing I want to talk about is the policy wall that's blocking asylum. Most of the work that I do is to represent people seeking asylum. And some would say that the end of asylum is coming near if things don't change quickly in this country. There are three major policy areas that this administration has created that have basically built a wall in front of asylum at our southern border. One is called metering, one is called migrant protection protocols, and then the third is a safe third country transit bar. So I'm going to show you guys a few pictures of from Tijuana, where we go to work with people who have been forced to remain in Mexico during the process of applying for asylum. This is a picture from the port of entry in Tijuana. Just about half a mile from here is where I go back and forth from the United States with my US passport, and I'm allowed to go in and out. This is where people seeking asylum go in the morning, and they were given a number that they get a number and are told to wait in Mexico until Custom Border Protection calls their number, and then they can process for asylum. Prior to this administration, this was not a process. People could go knock on the door of the port of entry and be processed for asylum. That doesn't mean you're let into the United States. It means that you're going through a very complicated legal process. But to deter people from seeking asylum in the United States, this administration started this thing called metering, and they place people on what's called La Lista. And they remain in Mexico for 6 months to a year in order to just ask for asylum. Once their number is called, this is a picture of some of the people that I worked with when their number was called. And what we would do that morning before they went into immigrant custody, we would tell them that they would be placed into an ice box for 5 to 7 days. It's called an hilera, and it's kept at about 60 degrees. And we'd give them warm clothes, socks, as well as children. And you see a picture of a woman's arm here. We would write the name of any family member she had in the United States and their number, because ICE often takes all of their documentation from them once they're in the United States. In addition, if anyone was traveling with children, we would write the name of their parent on each child's arm, as well as the parent's date of birth. Because as we've all learned, our government separated families and we're not able to reunite them. And so that was one way that we could ensure that hopefully our government would not permanently separate families. But as we know, that has continued to happen. Migrant protection protocol. So this is where, prior to this administration, people for asylum were processed into the United States and then paroled and would live with family members in the community or would remain in detention. But after migrant protection protocols, it forced everyone who was seeking asylum at our southern border to remain in Mexico, unless you were Mexican. And stay there during the pendency of your asylum hearing, which could be 1 year, 2 years. And so you can see here one of the camps that people built in Matamoros, Mexico. It is not a safe place for people to have to remain, and another way to deter people. The other policy that has had an extreme effect on the asylum process is called the Safe Third Country Transit Ban. When someone is applying for asylum, oftentimes they travel through a number of countries to get to the United States. And here you can see some of the routes through Mexico to get to the United States. But if someone is coming from a different country, not Mexico, to apply for asylum, the Safe Third Country Transit Ban says if you didn't apply for asylum in the third country and were denied for asylum, once you get to the southern border of the United States, you cannot qualify for asylum in the United States. Despite the fact that most countries that people travel through on their way to the United States do not have a trusted system for asylum, or the same fear that they are fleeing from in their home countries is in one of those countries. So it basically barred everybody from who was applying for asylum at the southern border, except if you were Mexican, from seeking asylum. This is just a journey of one of our clients who's from Cameroon. He had fled Cameroon, went to Nigeria, knew the laws of the United States, and knew that he just had to get to the southern border to apply for asylum. He was persecuted by his government because he's an Anglophone, an English speaker in a Francophone controlled country. Educated accountant, a lovely human, super smart. This was the journey he took up into Matamoros, Mexico. But because he traveled after the Safe Third Country Transit Ban happened, he may not be eligible for asylum anymore, even though it's truly the strongest asylum case I've ever seen in my 15 years of doing this work. I'm gonna skip this, but this is just, COVID has been quite present in our immigrant detention centers. And one of our clients was detained at this Oda Mesa detention center, and thankfully we were able to get him out towards the end of April. But almost everybody in that detention center got COVID, even though many of them had ways to get out of detention because they had family members in the United States. The final policy that I wanted to highlight tonight, which doesn't really need highlighting because I'm sure you're all very aware of it, but the policy of zero, a family separation at our border. We've learned that Jeff Sessions here, who was the Attorney General at the time, he started this program in order to deter people from seeking asylum in the United States. And he said, we need to take away children, no matter how young. And we all know some of the ramifications of that. So the zero tolerance policy that separated children from their parents who arrived at the southern border to seek asylum. We found out a few days ago that there are 666 children that are permanently separated from their parents due to this policy, and our government does not have a way yet to reunite them with their parents. Additionally, during COVID, asylum has stopped 100% at our southern border. We have closed it, and but children continue to try to seek asylum, and we turn them away. It's been a way for our government to close our border at the southern border and deter people from seeking asylum in the United States. So what's next? I don't know, maybe hope. President-elect Biden has indicated that one of his first things to do is to reunite the 666 children with their parents, if possible. And he's going to end family separation and prioritize reunification of children and refugees. He wants to restore asylum and refugee eligibility, and the 3 programs that I just talked about. Modify the approach to detention, meaning that he will look at alternatives to detention that are not only safer for the community and safer for the people seeking refuge in the United States, but also less costly to the taxpayer, and that will not continue to promote these private prison companies. Rescind the public charge rules, rescind the Muslim ban, have a pathway to citizenship for people with DACA, and then also be very mindful about TPS, temporary protected status, for people who have been in the United States for a long time. There are many questions that remain. We don't know what will happen or what they can do. President-elect Biden said within his first 100 days, he's going to propose a pathway to citizenship for 11 to 12 million people in the United States. Most of that depends on what Congress will do. The president doesn't have the authority to give lawful permanent resident status to that many people without Congress acting and creating a law. So we will see. One thing I wanted to highlight, because of the group that I'm talking about and the people who believe in education and fairness and equity in education, is DACA. So I mentioned before that there are over 6,000 people with DACA here in Wisconsin. Currently, after the Trump administration attempted to terminate DACA, and it went through the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, no, DACA is legal and people can continue to apply for DACA. That's not what has happened. So there's a lot of young people who would qualify for DACA who cannot process for DACA anymore because this administration refuses to process their applications. People who currently have DACA can continue to renew that. So this 6,600 people in Wisconsin can continue to renew it, but there's a number of other people that would be eligible for this. And why is this important? It's a protection from deportation, but it also allows these people to have work authorization and a social security number while they're in the United States. And their future is still unclear, so we'll see. One group that I wanted to highlight for you guys is called Dreamers of Wisconsin. And they're a new nonprofit, and they're dedicated to advocating for policy reform pertaining to tuition equity, a pathway to citizenship, and immigrant rights, both at the state and national level here in Wisconsin. People with DACA, if they are attending a school in Wisconsin, they do not, regardless of how long they've lived here, regardless of how long their parents have lived here, they pay out-of-state tuition. It is incredibly difficult, as we heard from some of our scholarship recipients tonight, to pay for out-of-state tuition, regardless of how much money even your family has. But these young dreamers are working really hard to create, eventually they want to have in-state tuition for people with DACA and undocumented students in Wisconsin. But as of now, they have a $100,000 fundraising goal for scholarships to people. There are 2 of their members who were accepted into medical school. They're brilliant. They just have to figure out a way to afford it. And there are some private scholarships that they may qualify for, but they're not eligible for any sort of federal money, FAFSA, or in-state tuition as it stands right now. So if any of you are interested in learning more, I have their website here. You can contact me. And then the final thing I wanted to say for this is, one thing I've been bothering my mom about recently is just to know my history. What I think all of us, as we move forward with immigration, knowing the facts and the law will ensure that a lot of the terror that has wreaked havoc across our immigrant communities in the past 4 years won't happen again. If we all know where our roots come from and how our ancestors came to the United States, we are all immigrants unless we were Native Americans or brought over here forcibly as slaves. This is a picture of my great-grandparents who, my great-grandmother never learned English, which I think was really interesting, and I never knew that before. but to see the progress that we've all made, and that her strength, her journey has given me the opportunities that I have today. And so while we're all looking for things to do during the pandemic and to learn and to grow, maybe all of you all know that already, what your history is. And I probably, as an immigration attorney, I should have known this before, but I think it's been really interesting to learn about the history, besides of just not where I come from, which is mostly Irish. And then I found like my mom says they're from Russia. I don't know about that, but we just are going to keep looking at it and learning more and becoming more educated about the history of our country, which I think is important. So I went through a million things very quickly, and I can look at the chat and hopefully maybe answer some of your questions, but also we can ask more questions. So let me know how we should continue. Do you think I should go through the questions now on the chat?
Actually, Erin, I'd like to thank you. This is Mary Messerly again. I'd like to just absolutely thank you. What an impressive, I felt like I was in one of your lectures, so I was taking copious notes. That was impressive, informative, very, very enlightening. Thank you so much for your time. Mitzi Dearborn, one of our members, has been following along, and she has been monitoring the questions / the comments. So I think I'm going to turn it over to Mitzi, and then she might be in a better position to field the questions and the comments. And we would absolutely love to hear, your further insight. So Misty, I'm just going to hand it over to your capable hands.
Hi, everyone. We've had a lot of questions. What a lot of wonderful interest in tonight's presentation. I will do the best I can to cover these. The first question is, could you expand on the statistic you mentioned about the contrast of being or not being represented by counsel in deportation cases?
Sure. So what the statistics have shown, there's a movement towards what's called universal representation. So certain cities or counties across the country are working towards providing representation to everybody in their county who's placed into removal proceedings. And what the studies have shown is people that are represented are 5 times more likely to be successful in their application for relief from deportation. So some people may be placed in removal proceedings for certain reasons. Maybe they're just here without authorization, or maybe they're at the southern border seeking asylum. If they have an attorney representing them, they're 5 times more likely for a judge to grant that relief, versus when they're representing themselves on a pro bono, pro se basis, so they're showing up on their own, then they are very unlikely to be successful in that process, because it's a legal process. And as I said before, there's a government attorney who's fighting for your deportation, and the person who is possibly being deported, they're not an attorney, and it's really difficult to understand the complexities of the relief that they're seeking.
Thank you. Next question is, how does one separate the folks being oppressed versus those that are opportunistic or even criminal entering our country?
No, I think that's a really good question. I think, unfortunately, the rhetoric against people seeking to come to the country has been false over the past few years, and really having a president who has called people criminals and opportunists has been incredibly detrimental to the safety of people and to the power of our laws. Our laws take that all into consideration. So if someone is coming here to seek asylum, it's an incredibly difficult process. I cannot win. When I represent someone in court, it's very unlikely I may win their case, but it's really complicated, and you have to fall within the narrow guidelines of our laws. And so it's really difficult for people to take advantage of that. But we've had an attorney general who called people immigration attorneys, dirty immigration attorneys, that we tell people what to say and how to lie, how to get through the process, which is really disheartening and also quite offensive, because as a lawyer, we have to abide by the rule of ethics. And I teach that to my students every day, regardless of how much I adore my clients. I would never, ever lie for them. And none of them really want to lie either. They really just want to go through the process in an ethical and safe way. And so our immigration system, it doesn't allow people to come in that are criminals or who are terrorists. And I think it's just important for us to really be cognizant of what the truth is in that manner.
Mhm.
Thank you. Next question. What percentage of people who request asylum actually get it?
That's a good question. Not many. It depends on where the individual is applying for asylum. At our southern border, so in a state like Louisiana, it's a 99% denial rate. In Chicago, I believe it's about 25% of the people applying for asylum will be successful. So it kind of really depends on where you're at. And the numbers have gone down significantly in the past 4 years because of Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General. He has the power to change some of the case law in asylum, and he has done everything in his power to decrease the ability of people from Central America to qualify for asylum based on gang violence and based on domestic violence.
Thank you. Next question. Is there economic asylum?
There is not economic asylum. No, it always has to be based on one of the qualifying grounds of race, persecution based on race, religion, nationality, membership in a particular social group, or political opinion. So most of what we see are people that are fleeing violence in their home country. So whether it's from Cameroon or we have a number of clients from Venezuela and from Cuba, which is just well known that is where people are very much persecuted because of their political opinions. But we also have a number of clients from Central America who are fleeing violence by private actors, so gangs and generally men who have control over women or young men in their communities and are persecuting them because the government has no way of protecting them. So we have to prove that the government is unable or unwilling to protect our clients as well. But no economic asylum.
Thank you. Next question. Can you describe the process the different refugees have to go through in order to be allowed into the country?
Sure. I don't work specifically with refugees because, as I mentioned before, refugees are, while they have the same definition of an asylee processes here in the United States. A refugee processes through the United Nations. So generally what will happen is someone who's seeking refugee status will be in a refugee camp in Turkey or Jordan. We don't have any UN stations here in Mexico or Central America or South America. Even though the UN has said that they will go to Mexico and start processing people, but the Mexican government has said no. But anyway, so someone who would like to seek refugee status at one of these camps, they will be processed through the UN. It's an incredibly complicated vetting process, and it can take years before you are given the refugee or deemed a refugee by the UN. And then once you are deemed the refugee by the UN has to find a country that's willing to accept you. And so prior to this administration, we were accepting about 85,000 refugees every year. But this year, for a number of reasons, it's almost at a zero.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Could COVID-19 be somewhat responsible for the decrease in 2020?
Yes, absolutely. It is definitely part of the process for the decrease in the number of lawful permanent residents coming to the United States. The number of people who are going to be eligible for asylum, for the closing of our borders, it will definitely have an effect on that. Yeah, it's just, yeah, for safety, they have said that that's why they've closed the southern border. However, that's hasn't been completely true or completely clear of why they've done that, because they've deported a number of people with COVID to other countries and have really increased the spread of COVID, especially in Central America, because of the way that they've deported people from the United States. But it's definitely part of the decrease in numbers and the decrease in processing. So I have a number of clients who are stuck abroad right now, who are even seeking their lawful permanent resident status through U.S. citizen spouses, and they can't get their visas because consulates are closed. And that's just the way the world is right now because we're in a pandemic.
Thank you. Next question. Why are the facilities so cold? To reduce the smell?
So the facilities are so cold. It's not 100% transparent why that is, but it's understood generally that it's a deterrent factor. They don't want people to be comfortable when they're in these facilities. And so you've seen probably pictures of the children with the Mylar blankets, the shiny silver blankets. That's all that they're given in those facilities. A number of reporters have asked ICE why they do it, but it's just within the policies, in their written policies and guidelines for the detention facilities.
Thank you. Next question. Could Congress override executive orders with law?
Yes. Well, yes and no. So the president, the executive office, the president has certain authority to create policies. And we've seen that through every president. This president has been quite active regarding immigration. So we saw with DACA. So President Obama created deferred action for childhood arrivals. Then this administration, the Trump administration, attempted to terminate it. And the goal of Obama's goal was to create deferred action for childhood arrivals and then have Congress act by creating a pathway to citizenship for those young people. And that never happened. So in the future, with President-elect Biden, he will be doing different things, some through executive order, but in order to have any sort of permanent road to citizenship or residency, that would need to come through an act of Congress. But there are things that Congress could do if they created a law that would terminate or change an executive order. It just depends on what it is.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Is there current legislation sitting waiting for votes by the current legislators?
Right now, I don't think so. There are things that have been, so for example, there's been a number of people in Congress who have attempted to pass something similar to called the DREAM Act, which would be a way for people of DACA to have a pathway to citizenship. But it's kind of unclear right now. And currently in this position right now, there's not much movement because of the turmoil. But I think in the future there will be proposed legislation to change our immigration system. We've been talking about immigration reform to our system since the early 2000s.
Okay, thank you. this is a little bit similar to a previous, but I think it's somewhat different. The question is, I understand that executive orders can prevent asylum to refugees, but no executive orders to allow refugees to receive asylum. Is that correct?
I think so. I'm not sure I completely understand the question, but the executive office doesn't necessarily has a way to change policies for people, as this administration has done with the Migrant Protection Protocol and with Safe Third Country Transit Ban, to make policy changes that aren't in direct conflict with the Immigration and Nationality Act. Now, all of those are being litigated because, in many people's opinions, that they are in direct conflict of people's rights to seek asylum in the United States based on our laws. So basically, the executive can't change a law or create a law, but they can do things that are kind of parallel to the laws. I don't know if that makes sense. It's kind of difficult to understand.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Do you believe, excuse me, do you believe that children separated from their parents will be able to be reunited?
I sure hope so. I have to believe that some of them will be. It's a large number of children, 666 children who have been permanently separated from their parents. Some of the parents, sadly, probably aren't living anymore. They were deported back to countries where they were fleeing persecution in a number of situations. Many of them are also maybe indigenous or live in areas where they don't have contact, access to communication, phones, and internet and things like that. So it's going to be very difficult, but I hope with the power of our government and the power of an administration that is really truly trying to right a wrong, that many of them will be reunited with their family. We represent 2 children that have been permanently separated from their parents, and I don't know if they will ever be reunited, and it's really sad, but they do have loving family members here that are caring for them for now.
Okay, thank you. I believe this is our last question that I have that I've received from the chat box. Well, one more came in as we were talking. What are some of the most common reasons for them wanting to leave their country? Which country has the highest rate of immigrants? The worst and best thing you have witnessed in your career? Boy, we have 3 questions all in one.
Yeah, I think I can probably answer those quickly so I don't take up too much of your time. But common reasons for fleeing country is mostly going to be political persecution. The countries where people are the highest numbers of immigrants receiving asylum, they're going to actually from China. The largest number of people who receive asylum in the United States are from China. And then Venezuela is the other one. Right now it's pretty much a failed state, and we represent a number of people who have been persecuted in Venezuela, and we'll see where that goes. Highest rate of immigrants, China is right up there. We also have a lot of family-based immigrants from Mexico. The countries that are what's called overprescribed, meaning that there's longer waiting lists for family members to come to the United States, are India, China, Mexico, and the Philippines. And then once in a while, it's also the Dominican Republic. The worst and the best, the worst thing I've witnessed is family separation. It's really unconscionable what we have done to families on purpose. I hope that the future is much brighter for our country and our humanity. And then the best thing I think is being able to see a family get the protection that they deserve under our laws, that our international laws and our international community has intended for them. I have a lot of love for my clients, and I think most people would. It's once you get to have that human interaction with someone who truly has faced persecution or a true fear, you understand why we really can be and should be the strongest country in the world. And we should lead by that, by showing humanitarian compassion to people, because it's truly how our laws were written. And I hope to continue to do that. But these past 4 years have been fraught with more losses and separation and goodbyes than I think necessary. But I'm hoping for a future that is more humane and compassionate and more of the fabric of the United States that I love.
Thank you so much for sharing. We've had lots of wonderful comments and feedback. It's very interesting, very helpful, and hopeful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you all so much for listening and for learning. And you're why I have hope for people like you. It was really wonderful to be in your presence tonight. I'm really grateful for all of you. And thank you for the invitation.